Today, we're diving into a brutal and honestly a mostly forgotten war. This wasn't a crusade to conquer some foreign land. It was a crusade to destroy an idea. This is the story of the Albigensian Crusade, a conflict that totally redefined power, belief, and what it even meant to be a heretic in the medieval world. I want you to just imagine for a second. What if your own personal spiritual beliefs, the things you hold to be true, were suddenly a crime? Not just unpopular, but a crime so serious it could spark an actual war against you, your family, your entire town. It sounds like something out of a dystopian movie, right? But for people in 13th century Europe, this was absolutely real. So let's set the scene. We're in 13th century southern France. This beautiful region became the stage for a vicious, decades-long war. And yeah, you've probably heard all about the Crusades to the Holy Land, but this one, fought on European soil, it was just as important and in some ways even more terrifying. So, in the year 1209, Pope Innocent III makes a truly chilling call. He launches a crusade, but his target wasn't some distant army or a rival religion. No, he declared war on his fellow Christians, right there in southern France. And why? Simply because of what they believed. Okay, so who were these people? Who held ideas that were seen as so dangerous? Well, they were called the Cathars, a name that actually means the pure ones. You might also hear them called the Albigensians, which is a name that comes from the town of Albi, one of their major centers. At the very core of what the Cathars believed was this radical idea called dualism. They basically saw the entire universe as a giant cosmic battle. On one side, a good god who created the spiritual world, and on the other, an evil force that created the physical material world, everything we can see and touch. And this is where they went in a completely different direction from the Catholic Church. The Church taught that one God created a good world. The Cathars, they said that world was an evil trap. And this led them to a revolutionary idea. You could connect directly with God yourself. You didn't need a priest, you didn't need a church. And that was a direct threat to the entire power structure of the Catholic Church. So a disagreement this big, this fundamental, it wasn't going to be solved with a friendly debate. It was basically a spark hitting a powder keg, and it ignited a firestorm, a brutal war that would rip through the region for more than 30 years. Now, this didn't just happen overnight. The ideas of Catharism had been growing since the 11th century, but by 1209, Pope Innocent III decided he'd had enough. He unleashed the crusade, led by a notoriously ruthless nobleman named Simon de Montfort. For the next 30 years, southern France was a war zone. The really big battles died down by the 1240s, but the hunt for so-called heretics? Oh, that was far from over. And the human cost, it's just staggering. We don't have exact numbers. History rarely keeps perfect records of things like this. But the devastation was immense. We are talking about thousands upon thousands of people killed. And not just Cathar believers, but entire towns, men, women, children, who were just caught in the crossfire as cities were literally burned to the ground. Now, the impact of this war didn't just stop when the fighting did. Its aftershocks, its ripples, would be felt for centuries. This crusade wasn't just the end of a religious group. It was a force that literally redrew the political and cultural map of Europe. So what did this 30-year-long war actually leave behind? Well, when you boil it all down, there were three huge outcomes that changed Europe forever. First, the incredibly rich and independent culture of southern France was just gone. This was a place with its own language, its own traditions, its own way of life. The crusade crushed it all, and the region was absorbed into the Kingdom of France, its unique voice basically silenced. Second, the church came out of this thing more powerful than it had ever been. By absolutely crushing this internal rebellion, it sent a chilling message to all of Christendom. Dissent will be met with overwhelming force. Don't even think about challenging our authority. And finally, the Crusade's most enduring and maybe its most sinister legacy. The very concept of heresy was turned into a weapon. It became this powerful label you could slap on any kind of opposition, religious, political, you name it. This set a really dark precedent that would echo for centuries, fueling things like the Inquisition and witch hunts. But history is never that simple. The official story, a holy war against evil heretics, is now being seriously questioned. Historians today are looking a lot closer,
and they're finding a much more complicated and, frankly, a much more cynical truth.
A lot of historians now argue this was never really just about religion. It was also about power and money. You had lords from northern France who desperately wanted the rich lands in the south. You had the French king who wanted to expand his own kingdom. And in this crusade, faith became a very convenient excuse for good old-fashioned greed. But what about the Cathars themselves? Trying to figure out what they truly believed is incredibly difficult. Why? Well, think about it. Almost everything we know about them was written by their enemies, the very same people who were hunting them down and burning them. The word heretic isn't what they called themselves. It's a label slapped on them by the winners, and it was used to turn a complex spiritual movement into a simple, evil thing that was easier to destroy. And that leaves us with this haunting question. The story of the Albigensian Crusade is a powerful reminder that history is so often written by the victors. It really makes you wonder, whose voices were silenced for good in the flames of this forgotten war? And what other stories, what other truths from our past are still buried out there, just waiting for us to find them?